For 15 years I upheld the law from my bench. Then, in a single night, I found myself slammed onto the pavement, a judge accused, and the system I served became my tormentor. The weight of the robe is something you never truly get used to. It's not the physical heaviness of the fabric, but the symbolic weight of the law, of impartiality, of lives held in the balance. For 15 years, I've carried that weight. Judge Marcus Thorne, my name, spoken with reverence in the halls of the district courthouse. I've presided over everything from petty theft to murder trials. I've looked into the eyes of hardened criminals and frightened first-time offenders. In my courtroom, the only things that mattered were facts, evidence, and the letter of the law. My skin color was as irrelevant as the brand of my shoes, or so I thought. The day it all shattered began like any other. An early morning run through my quiet, tree-lined neighborhood, a strong cup of black coffee, and a review of the day's docket. I left the house in my Lexus, a car I'd bought myself as a gift after my first 5 years on the bench. It was a symbol of my hard work, a quiet testament to a journey that took me from a cramped apartment in the inner city to the manicured lawns of the suburbs. I was heading to a charity gala downtown, a stuffy but necessary part of my public life. I'd swapped my judicial robes for a tailored tuxedo. I felt good, confident, in control. That feeling evaporated the moment I saw the flashing blue and red lights in my rearview mirror. My heart didn't pound. I wasn't scared. I was annoyed. I checked my speedometer. I was going the speed limit. I signaled, pulled over to the curb smoothly, and rolled down my window, placing my hands on the steering wheel where they could be clearly seen. It was a drill I'd known my whole life, long before I ever wore a robe. A young officer, couldn't have been more than 25, swaggered to my window. His name tag read Miller. He had that fresh-out-of-the-academy arrogance, a chin that was trying too hard to look tough, and eyes that were scanning my car, my suit, me, with a thinly veiled contempt. "License and registration," he grunted, not making eye contact. "Of course, officer," I said, my voice calm and even. I reached slowly for the glove compartment. "May I ask what the problem is?" "Your tail light's out," he said, his eyes finally locking on mine. A flicker of something, surprise, resentment, crossed his face as he took in the expensive interior of the car and my tuxedo. "You in a hurry to get somewhere important?" I handed him my documents. "I'm on my way to a charity event, officer. I apologize about the tail light. I wasn't aware. I'll have it fixed first thing in the morning." He took the license, his thumb covering my photo. He glanced at the name. "Marcus Thorne." He said it slowly, tasting the syllables. He still hadn't connected the dots. I decided to help him. Maybe it would expedite this ridiculous stop. It was a mistake. A catastrophic, life-altering mistake. "That's correct, officer. I'm Judge Thorne. I preside over the 5th District Court." The change was instantaneous. It wasn't the respectful deference I'd expected. His posture stiffened, his jaw tightened. He looked from my license back to my face, and a nasty smirk spread across his lips. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Oh, a judge, are we? Well, 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 Your Honor." He practically spat the title. He took a step back and tapped his radio. "Dispatch, I need backup. Got a situation here." My annoyance began to curdle into genuine alarm. "Backup? Officer, I think there's been a misunderstanding. It's a broken tail light." "Just stay in the car, Your Honor," he sneered. Within minutes, 2 more patrol cars squealed to a halt, boxing me in. 5 more officers, all of them as young and green as Miller, piled out. They moved with a predatory energy, a pack mentality taking over. They surrounded my Lexus, hands on their holsters, their faces grim masks of aggression. Miller was their alpha. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step out of the vehicle," Miller commanded, his voice now loud and booming for his audience. My blood ran cold. This was escalating far too quickly, spiraling into a nightmare. "For a tail light? Officer, this is highly irregular. Step out of the car now. Hands where I can see them." I complied. Slowly, carefully, I opened the door and stood up, my hands raised in a gesture of surrender. The night air was cool against my face. The flashing lights were disorienting, painting the street in frantic strokes of red and blue. The 6 of them formed a semicircle around me. "You think your fancy title means you're above the law?" Miller said, getting right in my face. His breath smelled of stale coffee and power. "You think you can just do whatever you want?" "I have done nothing wrong," I stated, my voice shaking slightly despite my best efforts. "This is harassment." That was the word that broke the dam. Miller's face contorted with rage. "Harassment? I'll show you harassment." He shoved me hard against the side of my car. The cold metal shocked my system. Before I could even react, another officer grabbed my arms and wrenched them behind my back. A knee dug brutally into my spine, forcing me forward. My face scraped against the roof of my own car as they slammed me down onto the hood. The pain was sharp, electric. Humiliation washed over me, hot and sickening. "You're under arrest for resisting an obstruction of justice," Miller snarled in my ear. "Resisting? I'm not resisting!" I cried out, my voice muffled against the car. Then came the click. The cold, metallic final sound of handcuffs locking around my wrists. They yanked me upright, only to shove me again, sending me stumbling off the curb. I lost my footing and fell, my tuxedo tearing as my knee hit the pavement. I landed hard on my side, the gravel of the street digging into my cheek. I lay there breathless, looking up at the 6 uniformed figures towering over me, their faces unreadable in the strobing lights. In their eyes, I wasn't Judge Marcus Thorne, a pillar of the community, a servant of the law. I was just another black man on the pavement, another body to be broken. A boot nudged my ribs, not hard enough to break anything, but with enough force to send a jolt of fiery pain through my side. "Get up!" a voice commanded. Two sets of hands grabbed the fabric of my ruined tuxedo jacket and hauled me to my feet. My head swam. The world was a dizzying kaleidoscope of flashing lights and hostile faces. They pushed me towards one of the patrol cars, my cuffed hands making it impossible to balance myself. I stumbled, and one of them laughed. It was a low, ugly sound. They shoved me into the back of the car, my 6'2" frame contorting to fit into the cramped space. The door slammed shut with a deafening finality. The interior smelled of stale sweat and cheap air freshener. A thick plastic partition separated me from the two officers in the front. I was in a cage. I, Judge Marcus Thorne, was in a cage. Through the window, I saw my Lexus, its hazard lights blinking rhythmically, a beacon of a life that suddenly felt 1,000,000 miles away. The ride to the station was silent except for the crackle of the police radio. I stared out the window, watching my neighborhood, the familiar houses, the well-tended gardens, blur into a meaningless smear. My mind, usually a fortress of logic and precedent, was a chaotic storm. I tried to analyze the situation from a legal standpoint. Unlawful stop, illegal search implied by the escalation, excessive force, wrongful arrest. The list of violations was a prosecutor's dream. But I wasn't in my courtroom. I was in the back of a squad car, and the law felt like a distant, abstract concept. The only thing that was real was the cold bite of the steel around my wrists and the throbbing in my knee. We arrived at the precinct, a brutalist concrete building that seemed to suck all the light and life from its surroundings. They pulled me out of the car and marched me inside. The perp walk. I'd seen it 1,000 times from the other side of the bench. Now I was the one with my head bowed, flanked by officers, feeling the weight of a dozen pairs of eyes on me. I heard whispers, saw phones being discreetly raised. A judge, in cuffs. This would be a spectacle. The booking room was a symphony of institutional misery. The air was thick with the smell of disinfectant and despair. The fluorescent lights hummed, casting a sickly yellow pallor on everything. Miller was there, leaning against a counter, a triumphant smirk plastered on his face. He was enjoying this. This was his masterpiece. "Empty your pockets," the booking sergeant, a man with a belly that strained the buttons of his uniform, grumbled without looking up. An officer roughly patted me down, pulling out my wallet and my phone. He tossed them into a grimy plastic bin. "Wallet, phone, keys," he announced, his voice flat and bored. The sergeant took my wallet and flipped it open. He pulled out my judicial ID. He stopped. He looked at the ID, then up at me. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed a police officer's face that night. He looked over at Miller. "Miller," the sergeant said, his voice a low rumble. "You see this? This is Judge Thorne." Miller strode over, snatched the ID from the sergeant's hand, and glanced at it. "I see it," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. He held it up for me to see. Doesn't mean much when you're acting like a common street thug, does it, Your Honor? My silence had been a strategy, an attempt to remain composed, to not give them any more ammunition. But this I couldn't let stand. I looked Miller dead in the eye, my voice low and steady, each word laced with the ice of 15 years on the bench. "Officer Miller," I said, "every action you have taken tonight has been a gross violation of procedure and my civil rights. I assure you, you are making a mistake of catastrophic proportions." Miller's smirk widened into a grin. He looked truly delighted. He tossed my ID back into the plastic bin and turned to the booking sergeant. The entire room seemed to quiet down, watching the exchange. "You know what, Sarge?" Miller said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "His Honor here is right. I did make a mistake." He paused for dramatic effect, a predator playing with his food. "I forgot a charge. Add assaulting a police officer to the sheet. He took a swing at me back at the car. Had to restrain him." The blood drained from my face. My heart, which had been pounding with adrenaline, seemed to stop altogether. Resisting arrest was one thing, a blatant lie, but one I could fight. Assaulting an officer, that was a career ender. It was a felony. It was my word against 6 of his. I looked at the booking sergeant, expecting him to question the new charge, to see the absurdity of it. But he just nodded, turned back to his keyboard, and his thick fingers began to type, sealing my fate with each hollow click. The click-clack of the sergeant's keyboard was the sound of my world crumbling. Assaulting a police officer. It was the perfect checkmate move. In a courtroom, the testimony of 6 officers against one man, regardless of his profession, was a nearly insurmountable mountain. Miller knew it. He gave me a final smug wink before turning and swaggering out of the booking room, his work done. The other officers who had been present at the scene were nowhere to be seen, already busy writing up their identical fabricated reports. I was fingerprinted. My mugshot was taken, the bright flash of the camera searing the moment into my memory forever. They took my tuxedo jacket, which was now evidence, and gave me a thin gray jumpsuit. They led me to a holding cell, the heavy iron door clanging shut behind me, the sound echoing the finality of my fall from grace. The cell was cold, concrete, and smelled of human misery. I sat on the hard metal bench, the weight of the last hour crashing down on me. I wasn't Judge Thorne anymore. I was inmate number 734. The system I had dedicated my life to upholding had swallowed me whole. I refused my one phone call. Who would I call? My wife, to terrify her? My clerk, to scandalize the courthouse? No. This was a battle I had to plan carefully. They let me sit there for 6 hours. 6 hours in a cold, silent hell, replaying every moment, every word. It was a classic intimidation tactic. Let the reality sink in, let the fear fester, let him break. But I didn't break. The initial shock and humiliation morphed into something else, a cold, hard resolve. A fire was lit inside me, forged in the icy despair of that cell. They had forgotten who I was. I wasn't just a judge. I was one of the best trial lawyers in the state before I ever put on a robe. They hadn't just arrested a man, they had declared war on the law itself, and I was its most devoted soldier. When my lawyer, a brilliant bulldog of a man named Ben Carter, whom I'd known since law school, finally arrived, the look on his face was a mixture of shock and fury. "Marcus, what in God's name happened?" I told him everything, from the broken tail light to the fabricated assault charge. I left nothing out. As I spoke, Ben's expression hardened. He took meticulous notes. When I finished, he looked at me, his eyes blazing. "They picked the wrong one, Marcus. They picked the absolute wrong one." Bail was posted. I walked out of the precinct in my rumpled suit pants and a T-shirt they'd given me, the rising sun blinding me. The news had already broken. Local news vans were parked across the street like vultures. The headline was already written in my mind: "Local judge arrested for assaulting officer." My reputation was in ashes, but we had a secret weapon. A little detail I had omitted when I was arrested, something I knew better than to reveal to Officer Miller and his cronies. My Lexus, the symbol of my success, was more than just a car. It was a fortress of technology. It had a state-of-the-art 360-degree dash-cam system that recorded video and, most importantly, audio, both inside and outside the vehicle. It automatically uploaded everything to a secure cloud server the moment the ignition was turned off. The next 2 weeks were a blur of legal maneuvers. The district attorney, a man who had tried cases in my court dozens of times, formally filed the charges. The police department issued a statement supporting the actions of their officers. The police union defended them vehemently. Officer Miller was a hero, a brave rookie who wasn't intimidated by a man of power. I was suspended from the bench pending the outcome of the case. The whispers and stares followed me everywhere. But then came the preliminary hearing. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, lawyers, other judges, everyone was there to witness the spectacle. Officer Miller took the stand, radiating smug confidence. He recounted his version of events, a beautifully constructed piece of fiction. He described how I was belligerent, how I reeked of alcohol. My blood test had come back 0.0, and how I threw a punch at him, forcing him and his fellow officers to subdue me. One by one, the other 5 officers took the stand and corroborated his story, their testimonies perfectly aligned. It was a symphony of perjury. When it was Ben's turn, he didn't cross-examine them. He simply walked to the evidence table and said, "The defense would like to present Exhibit A." He hit play. The courtroom monitors flickered to life. The video was crystal clear, the audio pristine. There was my car, my calm voice, my hands on the wheel. There was Officer Miller's swagger, his sneer. The entire stop played out exactly as it had happened. The camera captured every word, every insult, every shove. It captured Miller leaning in and fabricating the assault charge in the booking room. You could hear the gasps ripple through the courtroom. The district attorney went pale. Officer Miller's face, projected onto the giant screen, crumpled from arrogance to sheer panic. The video ended. Silence. The presiding judge looked down at the 6 officers, his face a mask of cold fury. "Every one of you is a disgrace to the uniform and an enemy of the very justice you swore to uphold," he said, his voice thundering through the courtroom. He dismissed all charges against me on the spot and ordered the immediate arrest of all 6 officers for perjury, assault, and filing a false police report. The fallout was biblical. The 6 rookies were fired and faced criminal charges, their careers over before they had truly begun. The police chief resigned. The city, facing an overwhelming avalanche of irrefutable evidence, quickly settled my civil rights lawsuit. They didn't even try to fight it. $10 million. It wasn't about the money. It was about the message. It was a lesson, paid for by the taxpayers, in accountability. I was reinstated to the bench, my name cleared. The first time I walked back into my courtroom and put on my robe, the weight felt different. It was heavier, but I felt stronger. The ordeal had scarred me, but it hadn't broken me. It had reminded me that the law is a fragile thing, constantly under assault from the very people sworn to protect it. And I learned that sometimes the most important battles aren't fought from behind the bench, but from the pavement with your face in the dirt. They tried to make me another statistic. Instead, they made me a symbol, and that was a lesson they, and the city, would never forget.